All right, it looks like we are live on Facebook and we are live on Zoom. So thank you for joining us, whatever location you're in, or maybe you're just watching this C National Digital Lab on your TV or your computer in the middle of the night and you're eating Cheetos right now. Welcome to you, whoever you are and wherever you are. My name is Eric Miller. I'm the Director of Ministry Operations, and this is another C National Digital Lab. We are excited that you pressed play on this video today because we're talking with our two Urban Hope Training Center directors on how you as a church leader can impact your community. You probably, if you're a youth pastor, a pastor, if you're a volunteer in your church and you want to reach your community, then this is the video for you. So we hope that you'll stay tuned with us over the course of the next half hour, 45 minutes or so, as we want desperately to help encourage you, equip you in this conversation. And so we're pulling in our Urban Hope training directors. I'm excited about what God has been doing in and through them while we've been in this weird year of 2020. We have not been able to, unfortunately, have any teams go to either LA or Philadelphia. Both of those locations are like coronavirus hotspots right now. Philadelphia, Andy was telling me yesterday, is still under like 25 people. You can't have more than 25 people even gather. So we're very hopeful that we'll be able to reopen both of our training centers here soon. So stay tuned for that. We'll let you know about that. But in the meantime, Tim and Andy have worked really hard to put together an event called Day of Hope. And it's coming up on October 10th, 2020. So 10-10-20. I love the creativity behind that. And the tagline is, we want to help you double down on your investment to impact your community. So you can register for all of that at the Urban Hope website, urbanhope.net/Day of Hope. You can register, find all the details for that there. Please join us for that. We'll tell you a little bit about this here during this digital lab. But really our conversation today is a precursor to Day of Hope. So nothing that we're going to talk about here will take away from Day of Hope. We would encourage you to do both. So sign up for that. It is a free event. Okay, we cannot emphasize that enough. Maybe in post-edit of this video, we'll flash like free over the screen. So we want you to know that C National is here to be a resource. We want to partner with local churches to help equip you and encourage you. So let's dive into our conversation here today. Tim, why don't you just kind of tell us a little bit about how long you've been working with Los Angeles Urban Hope and a little bit about your background, and then Andy will let you take a turn here as well.
Yeah, so I guess I have an official and an unofficial start date with C National. So officially started on June 1st of 2019. That's when I officially came on full time. But prior to that, we actually launched Urban Hope LA in January of 2019, so 6 months prior. And so I was actually doing some stuff with teams earlier on in 2019. But so we're almost coming up on 2 years that Urban Hope LA has been open. I wish we could say we've been open the entire time, but last 6 months has been a little bit different. But my background, I also work with junior high school students, college students here at my church, and have been doing that for about 16 years. So I've been involved in ministry most of my life. So it's been fun to be with C National. So
yeah. Andy, what about you?
Yeah, in a weird way, I kind of have a similar story, as I was brought on part-time at first because of the COVID situation, right, over the summer, which was not by design, but and then my full-time start date wasn't really until September 7th of this year. So like when I say new, we mean brand new. But in the process over the summer, I did a lot of research. I hung out with Ed and Jeff a lot. And so we got to kind of ease in and into that transition, and I got to learn a lot and to kind of prep me for this time.
Yeah, as many of our viewers likely know, Ed Lewis, former president of CE National, for the last couple of years has really functioned as our Urban Hope Philadelphia training center director, right? He's been there, he's lived there. Ed is in the process of retiring. In fact, I'm pretty sure he's in Hawaii as we speak. So we're all, wishing him the best. Everybody loves Ed. He's an amazing guy. So Andy, you've got big shoes to fill, but you're going to do a great job running the training center there in Philadelphia. We're glad to have you on board and to have you part of the team. Now that you're finally living in the state of Pennsylvania, you guys couldn't even, because of coronavirus, you couldn't even go look at houses for such a while. In an ideal world, we would have had you there with all of the teams all summer long, rubbing shoulders with Ed and learning from him. And yet, God is faithful and he's good, and it's all in his timing and his plan. So we're learning as we go here. All of us are in the same boat with COVID-19. So let's dive in. Let's talk about our goal for this conversation today. We really want to help equip youth leaders, pastors, churches to, one, assess the needs in your community. You probably live in a neighborhood. You probably have your church in a town. There are obviously people who come to your church. There are obviously people that you would love to come to your church. And so how do you figure out what really are the needs of the people in your community? And then how do you connect the people of your church, the resources of your church, even the strengths of your church to meet those needs in the community? We're going to talk about that here today. There is, as many of us know, there's a unique dynamic of meeting physical needs that often in turn allow or enable you to meet spiritual needs. They go hand in hand. We saw Jesus do that in the New Testament all the time. We're wired that way in many ways, how God's created us. So I'm excited about this conversation. So guys, why don't we dive into this conversation? Tell us a little bit about just your heart, your passion for this, what our goal is, maybe for somebody who's not familiar with what the Urban Hope Training Center is. Why are you guys passionate about your job and what you guys get to do as the Urban Hope Training Center directors? Speak into that a little bit, maybe, and even feel free to shameless plug Day of Hope too. So however you want to do that, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I get super excited. I was thinking about it today because kind of two reasons, really. It's a twofold answer that I have actually that I was thinking about, but I get to work with a team of you guys and more at CE and Urban Hope, between me, you, Tim, Eric, and Ed Short, and we get to kind of set the vision. We're like, hey, this has been going on for the summer, COVID, and then we look at what's been going on with Ed over the past how many years. We kind of do the math, we put it all together, we see this groundwork that's been laid, but we have the opportunity to do a little bit of revisioning and replanning and re-strategizing it. And I love getting to do that with the team, because I get super excited sometimes and I want to go. But then sometimes, Tim or Ed or you will be like, let's look at this. And then it could have been a 5 out of the gates, but because I work through with you guys, I mean, it ends up looking more like an 8, a 9, or a 10. So that's my first reason that I love doing this. The second reason, I think, is that I get to do the end of that. So we go together, we put the big vision into work, and then I have to figure out how it tangibly and practically will play out. I mean, it's a blast, getting to, and we still aren't there yet. We're in the process of doing that. But man, sometimes like today and yesterday, I just say, God, I'm blessed that I get to do this, that I get to come to work and actually put in the work to figure it out, but have a team of you guys around me to help do it, all for the purpose, right, of connecting people and doing the work that Jesus did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's always fun to love what you do, right? I mean, if everybody could love what they do, I think this world would be an incredible place, right? And so be able to come into a job where you love engaging with people. I'm a people person. I think Andy would probably say the same thing, right? We love people. We love to engage with people. And so just to be around different groups of teams that are coming through the Urban Hope doors. Me and my wife talk about this often, because there's two types of people. There are the people that get drained by people. So if you're around people that drains you and it sucks the energy out of you, right? And then there's the other side where it's like there are people who are energized by being around other people, right? I love being around other people, and that energizes me, and that makes my day that much greater and better. And so I just love being able to see teams come through to not only engage with them, but then to go out into the communities that we're in, so Los Angeles and Philly, right? To be able to go with those teams and watch them really practice what we've been training them for and teaching them. And so I think that's just kind of the incredible thing. And then I always think about when I was a kid, my dad, he loved to go fishing. So he would go fishing often. And I remember as a little kid thinking, I want to go fishing with my dad, right? One, because I want to engage, I want to spend time with my dad. But two, there was just something in my mind like fishing's fun. And I'll never forget that first time fishing, like we didn't catch anything, right? And I was thinking, well, this is kind of boring, right? But when you catch fish, there's excitement in it. And the days that I would go home and we had caught multiple fish, like I was super excited to be out there for those 3-4 hours early in the morning, whatever it was, right? And I think the same thing about like when as we are sending people out, the part of my job that I also love is just I love when people catch it, right? I love when people, it's like catching that fish with my dad, right? Like that was brought excitement. When people catch what we're trying to teach them, the principles we're giving them, and not only catch it when they're with us, but I love hearing stories when they go back home and they send me an email or they message me on social media and they're like, Tim, you'll never like imagine the fishing opportunity I had today. You'll never imagine the opportunity I have to share Christ with someone. I love hearing those things.
Yeah.
And for me, that just kind of energizes me and helps me to love my job even more. So if you've been to Urban Hope and you have those stories, send them our way. We'd love to hear them. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I love about the Urban Hope training centers is that when you go, you literally get hands-on ministry training experience. You get that you get the real impact right away because you're in a real neighborhood, you're in an urban center, you're in a place where you're encouraged and sometimes forced to step out of your comfort zone just because of the nature of where you're at. And so maybe if you live in a very like suburban neighborhood, if you live in a middle of nowhere kind of country setting, it forces you to do that and to because you're around people. And so you get to use what you've been trained and equipped right there in that weekend or in that day or in that week long that you're there. And then there's like encouragement. There's feedback that's given both to the youth leaders, to the team leader, but then to the students, to the participants. And that can change everything. Where Tim, you're exactly right. Those like light bulbs go on for people. And then you begin to realize like, wait a second, I don't have to go to an urban center, to a big city to do this. These are transferable principles that we're teaching at the training center that I can take home. And so one of the things that I know we've been working hard on over the summer is that while we haven't been able to have teams come, we're working hard to rebrand, to relaunch the Urban Hope Training Centers. And I'm so pumped that when we do, and when we're able to have teams come back, if you've taken a team to the Urban Hope Training Center, either one, LA or Philly, you're going to find that when you go back, it's not your mama or your daddy's Urban Hope Training Center. It's going to have a fresh look to it. You're going to be encouraged. You'll find that there is a real partnership on both ends of the trip. In the beginning, Tim and Andy are going to do a phenomenal job of working with you to try and help you understand, hey, what to expect when you come. They're going to want to learn some of the dynamics of who your team is, who you're bringing, the makeup of them, right? How they can encourage them. And then also during that trip, of course, there'll be the training, the equipping, the experience opportunities that they'll have. But then to go home, and exactly like Tim, you were just saying, we want to work hard with you to do follow-up, to reach back out, to check in, to encourage you. When your students are not getting it, and we want to help walk with you through that process. So I'm excited about that, and just the goal of the Urban Hope Training Center, it will not change. That is still the same. We want to see people come to know Christ. We want to see you be equipped to share Christ and do it in whatever community you live in. So Let's talk a little bit today about how do we help churches see the needs in their community. Talk to me a little bit about that, because sometimes that can be a tension point, right? Where people are like, I live in Amish country, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or maybe you live in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. You don't even have cell service or the internet yet. And then you go to Urban Hope in LA or Philadelphia, and you're like, I don't have access to the Hope Mobile with the door that folds down and the stage and TVs, and I don't have access to thousands of people within a block of me. Like, how do you help people see the needs of their community? Walk us through that process.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of backtrack just a tad, because I want to, most people have been through college, right? You go to college, you get your training, right? You get your education, and then that's supposed to propel you into your job, right? But what's the problem? When you get out of college, you put together your resume and you get ready to go get a job, you often get passed over because what? You don't have the experience, right? You have the education. And I feel like that's such a frustrating thing, right? I have all this training, all this education, but now nobody wants me because I don't have the experience, right? And so again, kind of going back to the thrust of Urban Hope is we don't want you to sit in a classroom for a number of hours, right? And it could be the same in a church setting. We don't want churches just to teach and to train. That's an important component of it, but that's not the end of it, right? And so we really say, like, there needs to be two components. It's the teaching, the training, the education, if you will, but then there's also that experience piece, and we want people to have both, and to especially when they come to an Urban Hope Center, to leave with both, because then that's going to propel you when you go home. And whether you're a church listening in today, or whether you're just an individual, you're not in leadership at a church, but you're just maybe a church attender, follower of Jesus, right? But I think there's kind of two sides to evangelism, to seeing the needs of your community. You're either doing that as an individual, as a neighbor, right? Or you're doing that as a organization, as a church in your community, what that looks like. And so there's really, I think, two sides to that. And we just want to say that, evangelism has to be relational. And I'll probably mention that a couple of times throughout our time this morning. Right? Like, we have to build relationships. And so again, if you are a church and you're saying, how do we assess the needs of our community? What does that look like? Then you have to be in your community. One of our previous pastors would always say this. He's like, it's the heart, being in the heart of the community with the community at heart. Right? And so it's that concept of, are you just a presence in your community, or are you really are you engaged with your community, with your neighbors and those around you? And I think we just have to look at that as a church. And then as an individual, I always say this, like, if you live in a home, unless you're in more of a rural community, which may be a little tougher, but like, at least if you're surrounded by some other homes in your neighborhood, I always think like a tic-tac-toe box. If you were to put yourself right in the middle of that tic-tac-toe box, that means there's 8 other boxes around you, and you could say, hey, that represents 8 other homes or 8 other families around me. And I would say, do you know those 8 families, right? Maybe the 3 behind you, the 2 next to you, the 3 across the street from you. Like, have you taken the time to get to know your neighbors? Because again, if you want to be intentional in sharing the gospel, like, then again, it comes back to building relationships with people. It's not, at Urban Hope, we do everything within like a day or a week, right? Because we have certain time we want to train you and give you experience. But honestly, when you go home, it may be a 2-year process that you're spending building into someone, just so they take that first step or that next step with Jesus. So
yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Tim. Exactly what and it was where I was thinking about when Eric was asking that question, like, how do we help churches to see the needs, right? And it's that people piece. If we make those relationships and we build those relationships, we're going to find out by someone who lives in the community, by someone that is in the community that we're serving. So we could go into a community, we could, put on a 3-on-3 tournament, and it could be awesome. But if we don't make any relationships, so if we don't make any points of contact, so if we don't try to actually talk to somebody, it's like, great, that was a great basketball tournament, but did you actually connect with anybody? Did you build relationships? But if you do, that's when we can actually speak into the community, because the community is people. It's not a place. So I believe 100% with you, Tim, that's what we're trying to do through Urban Hope. Exactly like the way Day of Hope, I'm sorry. Just like we would at Urban Hope for the Day of Hope, we want you guys to send out our teams where they live after we've given them that training piece, and it's like, hey, you might feel awkward at first starting a conversation. Then here's what you do. Then here's what you do. And when you get to this point, here's what you do. And I think what a lot of our teams and a lot of our students have found and will find is that first step, taking that first step, once you get past that, and once you have a foundation that you've had laid a little bit, God does the rest. He really does. The Spirit kind of takes control. That training piece that we try to lay down helps a lot. And then we can actually see some of those moments that you were talking about earlier, Tim, where we see relationships build. We see the light bulb go off. We see people get on fire about evangelism. And that's what we want.
Yeah, and I think the church probably has two roles when it comes to evangelism, as the church as an organization, right? Because I think as the church, we need to propel our people and provide opportunities for evangelism. So Andy, like you were talking about, hey, if you're going to do some kind of sports camp as a church, that's great. Do that. Get your people involved and walk them through that process of what it looks like to not just do a sports camp, but to get involved in people's lives, to build relationships, ultimately for the goal of sharing the gospel with them, right? But then I think the church also really has to emphasize, because if we just stop there, I think we've missed it. We really have to emphasize as church leaders, as churches, look at ministry doesn't just happen on our campus in a church setting, right? So we have to be encouraging our folks. Look at this, again, that's a training ground, right? So use those opportunities as churches to say, look, we're going to put on this sports camp, or we're going to do this neighborhood outreach, and we want you to come be a part of it. But again, we want you to use this as a training experience so that when you're not with the rest of the church body during the week, and you're with your coworkers or you're with your neighbors, you know how to be relational, because again, every individual is called to the Great Commission, right? Every individual is called to share the gospel with those around them that God's placed in their path. It doesn't just happen in an organized, programmed setting, right? It has to, I think both of those have a place, but both have to happen. So.
Yeah, and if you're relational, you have a point to leverage to share the gospel. Yeah, you just made me think of that.
Yeah, no, I think what you guys are talking about is so good, because there absolutely are churches who their hearts are in the right place. They want desperately to reach their community, and they start with, okay, who do we have in our church that we can offer something, right? And that's not a bad place to start. But if it's, in the scenario that Andy, you just mentioned, if we say, hey, we love basketball, we're going to run a basketball tournament, we've got basketball courts here at our church, let's do a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. And then you promote it, you plan it, you go through all the works of it, and then you find out nobody in the community likes basketball. They all love playing soccer. And nobody shows. Right? Well, that's probably not an effective outreach, right? It didn't communicate. It didn't match the needs of the community. And so give us kind of what are some things that you guys would recommend, encourage that churches think through in ways that they can see the needs of the community, but also to really know or understand, to assess what are the needs in a local community. And when we say needs, we're talking yes, the physical needs, but also things that would lead to meeting a spiritual need, right? That would enable us to share the gospel.
Yeah. I mean, I would just start off saying, and I think this is probably a given, but I would say we first need to pray, right? We have to ask God if He's already laid that upon our hearts to try and understand our community. And we'll talk about this at the Day of Hope a little bit, about this idea of caring for our community and investing in them, right? But I think we need to pray and say, God, reveal to us as a church body, or reveal to me as an individual, what are the needs around me? There are some big, real needs that every community has, and every community is probably going to be a little different. Right? Like I guarantee you there's some urban centers right now in urban cities that with all the riots that have been going on and the damage from those, there's probably a different need there now than there was before, or maybe as in a rural community,
Mhm.
right? Or and some communities are, people are out of work and big industries have been letting go of people, so there's different needs there. And so I think we have to start with prayer and really seek the Lord and say, God, help us to understand. But then the second piece of that then is like go out into your community. And that could be as simple as like go and find an organization that's already doing stuff and engage with people and go spend some time volunteering with them,
Yeah.
right? And say, what are you guys doing? I always this is years ago, but I did that whole study, Experiencing God with Henry Blackaby.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that he says is watch to see where God's working and then go join him in that,
Yep.
right? It's kind of that same concept. Like, what is God already stirring in your community? Like here in LA, with all of our students, right? Even today, we can't, very few schools, and these are more outskirts, are in session in person. Most of them are, almost everybody's virtual here in LA or California. Um, but there's an organization that we partner with that they said, you know what? We know kids are now struggling because virtual learning is completely different. So they have a huge parking lot. They set up tables. They were able to get computers and keyboards and the whole setup. And they're now inviting families and students to come in and they're just saying, look, we're going to provide a setting where there's a person that's going to sit here and help really like tutor their kids, but they're going to be here if your kids have questions as they're working through. A lot of it's elementary age, some middle school age, but like they saw a need in their community, right? They saw a need and they said, how can we meet that need? And they found ways to do it.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah.
I just think things like that. It's praying, it's getting involved, it's looking around and saying, what are those real needs today that we can meet?
Hmm.
Yep. Yep. I love the last part of that you added on, Eric, to the question is kind of what I heard is what are some of the needs that would lead to later spiritual needs?
Mhm.
And so I mean I think of on like I'm gonna go from the other side of things like you think of like some of these small towns, okay, that we see on the movies or the shows, but they really do exist, like in Alabama, maybe in Ohio, but of like football towns, right, where like football is king. You play from the time that you're 5 until you're, 19 and or however old it is that you're a senior, and that's what they push and they push and they push, and that becomes your god. And let's say you're even the star athlete, but it gets to the point where hey, you might get into a college, but the odds are you're probably not going to make it to the NFL. I'm not trying to be a dream crusher here, but I mean, if we're playing the odds game, if that becomes your idol and your god,
Hmm.
and the bottom falls out of that, suddenly you're going to be looking at depression, anxiety. You're going to be just destroyed. That's if it doesn't come sooner, right? And so I think having a good temperature on what are those type of things in your town, if there's like a dominant culture in your area or your city where there's things like that are it's not even a bad thing, it's just very strongly encouraged, but the likelihood of the top tier of success coming out of that is very challenging and very hard, and it's going to leave a lot of people broken. That's a massive opportunity for the healing power of God to come in,
Mhm.
and for us as Christians to step alongside them and say, hey, there's actually something a little bit more important that we can kind of navigate the relationship from there, and hopefully step in before those levels of the depression and anxiety that might come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's funny because when you think about like it, let's just go stereotypical. Like probably most churches who've come to one of the Urban Hope training centers, they've had an experience where they've done homeless ministry, and yet you've probably been equipped in that. Maybe you've done that at Momentum Youth Conference. Maybe you've gotten experience in that in some way, shape, or form. And yet, for many of your local churches and in your community, you very well may not have a massive homeless population in your area. And so how do you take those principles that may be transferable, sure, but to come back and say we're going to start a homeless ministry in our community when you don't have any homeless people, well, that's not a good use of your time, your resources, your investment, right? So kind of let's take this now the next step further. If we're speaking to a local church, a local pastor, maybe a youth pastor, and they're saying, how do I really understand what are the needs in my community? Where are some starting points for these pastors and churches? What do you guys think about that?
I've been asking a lot of leaders that I've talked to about Day of Hope. I've asked them this question, and I don't know if it's a real thing or I made it up or people say it all the time, but I said, what's your ministry context? What's the context of the ministry that you're doing? And I think that's a good starting point to see maybe, and it could look like a variety of different things. So maybe there's partners that, local ministry partners that you've been known to partner with. Maybe there's organizations that you haven't asked yet. But if you were like, hey, do you need 20 volunteers to show up and do some work or do some free labor? I'm gonna bank that they're gonna say yes. And from that point on, the door is wide open. Right. So I mean, partnering with some of those organizations and those ministries and those leaders around your church, and just like looking around, I've heard it said before to chase after Jesus as fast as you can, and then look around to see who's beside you. And so I think when you're looking around to see who's running with you, those are the people you want to start asking and questioning, like, hey, how can we serve the people that you're with? And that, I think, gives you a better idea of your community and the context that's around you. Then you can have a starting point to begin to reach out to some of these people around you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Andy. We actually, just real quick, did a digital lab on that very topic with my wife Bethany, who works for Habitat for Humanity, and Eric Lane on helping without hurting. And so that's an amazing digital lab that you could check out too, in a conversation of how you as a local church or an individual can partner with some other ministries, organizations that are in your community that would actually help and not hinder what they're doing, and you can work together to multiply those efforts. Yeah. Tim, what were you going to say?
I'm just going to add on to that. I love what you're saying, Andy, because again, I think oftentimes we think we have to create new ministries, new programs, and there's room for that, and definitely. But I think oftentimes, yeah, there are organizations that maybe you already partner with, or maybe you're not aware of, and maybe it's just doing some research in your community and saying, let me find out what other organizations are doing, what those needs are that they're meeting, and then find out, are they doing it well? Because if they're doing it well, then get your people involved in that and do it, right? If they're not doing it well, then maybe you need to be rethinking, okay, how can we rethink what they're doing, but do it a little bit better and really meet that need and meet that spiritual need? Because I think there's a lot of organizations that meet the tangible need and maybe even meet the emotional need, but don't always meet that spiritual need. Right. And so we want to make sure that we're not missing out on that spiritual component. Andy, you said it great earlier, right? And I think we just need to make sure that we're hitting hard that anything that we do as believers needs to go back to the gospel, needs to go back to Jesus, to make sure that we're not just tutoring kids to tutor kids. We're not just doing sports camps because we want kids to be, involved in something, but we want to do it because we love people and we want them to understand the hope of Jesus. And so I think that's important. I mean, again, I think even just something as simple as, we need to find out where are lost people hanging out, and then let's go hang out there, right? And so that could be in your community. I talked to one guy, said, I know and here in the city, we have lots of laundromats. And so a lot of those people don't know the Lord. So go hang out at laundromats, help people, whatever. One guy was saying, like, we don't have any laundromats in our community. Everybody's got, their own laundry facility. But again, every city, every community has to find out what works for them. Maybe getting involved as a coach, right? To where you're engaging now with families. Like, I know our family, we were trying to decide when we moved to Norwalk, where we are now here in LA, trying to decide, do we put our kids into a Christian school, a public school? What does that look like? And we kind of intentionally said, we're going to put them into a public school because that's going to help us to rub shoulders with other families that don't know the Lord. And we've had incredible opportunities over the last couple of years. And my wife has been excellent at this, to rub shoulders with other moms, get involved in PTA, those type of things, where now she's starting to understand really the needs of that community and the school and even the community abroad, because of just spending time with people in that context.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you guys you're really hitting on something good, that, if you're a church or a pastor and you're really trying to assess what are the needs in our community, you might look around and say, what are there lots of, right? Maybe they're, like Tim, you just said, there's lots of laundromats here. And so maybe you arm your people and you go out with lots of rolls of quarters to bless people and pay for their laundry for the afternoon. And then you get to sit there and have conversations. Or maybe if there's lots of low income neighborhoods, then you go out and you arm your people with rolls of toilet paper or batteries or light bulbs, or tangible things that they might actually have a need for. Or the good old one of doing yard work, and go around. Fall is coming, take your people and go rake leaves for the elderly who can't go do that. And so find those communities, those neighborhoods where there are those needs. You could probably do that by driving around and looking and praying, but also it may be picking up the phone book or looking online to see what are the local services that are offered. If there's 10 or 12 like Alcohol Anonymous organizations that meet at different churches and different places in your community, well, then that's probably a big need. And so to think through what are the ways that we can partner with them. Maybe if you call them and they're like, we're drowning, we don't have enough, there's so many people in our community who need this service, well, then how can we help you? And you get to leverage that. So I think just you guys are doing a great job thinking that through and helping that. So let's kind of flip the coin to the other side. Now, as pastors, as church leaders, as ministry leaders, how do we see what are the resources that we have within our churches? Maybe what are the strengths of our congregation that we could go and use that? How can we encourage them to look at that in order to leverage those resources to meet the needs of the community then? Thoughts on that?
I know. I think I hear oftentimes, especially for maybe older congregations or congregations that have a lot of older members in there, our people, they just can't go out, right? They can't, we just don't have a lot that can do that. And I would say, well, leverage that. Like, you may have a small group that can go out, but leverage those that can't go out. Find out what are their strengths, what do they love to do. I've seen so many of more of the older generation get involved by, like here in our church, we had a group of ladies that said, we're going to start making beanies. I don't know if they crocheted them or what the correct terminology is, but they made beanies. And they said, they provided like 50 beanies to our ministry that goes out and does homeless ministry, right? So leverage that. There's a church up in Northern California that they took all the plastic bags that in California you can no longer have. And so they took those plastic bags and they made homeless mats, right? And so they made, hundreds of these homeless mats and sent them to Urban Hope, and they sent them to other organizations, right? Incredible things. And I'm trying to think, there's even some others that have made quilts, like quilting groups. And so they've made quilts and then given those to different groups. And so I just think, find out kind of, Eric, what you're saying, like find out what the giftings of your people are. And especially if there's those people that say, because of whatever reason, they can't go out and actually engage with the people, but utilize them, create a prayer team with them, or find out what they love to do, if it's quilting or what they're talented in, and say, hey, how can we use that to support a team that's going to go out and engage with them, share the gospel with them? Because then you can use that to say, hey, here's a tangible need at the same time where we're providing a spiritual need. And so just trying to leverage some of those opportunities with your people. Again, you have to know your people, right? You have to know.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Tim. I would take it even one step further and encourage any church or any leaders that have a team to take the effort. There's dozens of those personality tests and like training sessions that are available out there, whether it's what's the one, Myers-Briggs, or I've recently gone through the Enneagram and read the book Journey Back to You, I believe it's called, or The Road Back to You. And one of the fascinating things that I read in there, it said they polled tons and tons of industries and companies and businesses from like $500,000 to $500 million corporations. And they said the number one key factor in success, they said, was self-discovery. So leading people to self-discover themselves, to know themselves, first of all, have that self-leadership component, and then know the people around you and how they work, and you know why they do things, and you know why you're doing things. And then as a leader of an organization or a church, let's just say a church, I mean, that's kind of your job to know your leaders and then send them out as you know them. Like you just said it, Tim, know your people. Like, and I agree with that all day, every day. Like I will develop people before I develop a place any day of the week. And so, I mean, knowing your people and then knowing where they're passionate about and where they're gifted at. And if they can do it and do it good, then we're going somewhere, right? And then why they're wired that way, like the Enneagram type stuff.
Yeah, we have a group of people that love to cycle here in our community. And so some of our guys, it's like, let's get on a bike together. Let's go cycle down the riverbed. And at the same time, maybe we'll engage with some homeless people or bring some extra snacks along, or right. Like, I think there's so many ways that you can, we have a pastor that just came on staff that he's from outside the area. And so he's trying to think, how do I connect with the community right here? So he's trying to find a cycling club because he likes to cycle. He's like, I'm going to go get connected with some of the mortuaries to see how I can engage with families in a time of need and connecting there. So again, it's just being creative and finding out ways that you can connect with your community and where those needs are. So
yeah, that's awesome, because to me, when you're able to like see the needs of the community, see the needs of the strengths of your church or what resources you have, when you can start like doubling down on those things, that's where you really see God start to work and do something amazing. And so, I was a youth pastor in Maryland for a long time, and in Indiana, where I grew up, I was allowed as a college student to go into the schools to have lunch with our students. Right, that was totally fine. They allowed me to do that. Well, then when I moved to Maryland, that's not allowed. As a youth pastor, I couldn't even stand on the school property at the end of the day to say hello to the students. So I then decided, like, okay, well, there's a need as a youth pastor. I wanted to meet the needs of our students. And so I actually applied to be a student, to be a substitute teacher in the schools, so that then they started paying me to come on their campus.
Nice.
So that I could engage with the students. And something so simple like that, right? But there were multiple ways and reasons where then I could multiply that effectiveness and build relationships with students and get to know them in a better area. So I think whatever your context is, Andy, you're right, to be able to like not just look at the one aspect of it, but how do we multiply this? How do we be effective in really, like, if you're going to sign up your group to come to Day of Hope, we want to train and equip you, but there's some work that you as a leader are going to need to do ahead of time, and certainly afterwards. And so think those things through and be prepared for that. Yeah.
And I don't mean to push too hard for a leader of a church to have those. It might sound corny, or it might sound like, oh, you want me to do another personality type test or another like thing, a group, like a class like that for my people. But I believe that it's worth it, man. It is really worth it to figure those things out and push your people to go through that self-discovery, and then that, and you can lead them well, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Well, guys, let's kind of, I know you're going to go deep on this at Day of Hope. So again, we don't want to take away from that, but give us kind of what's a simple thing that churches or individuals can do that would share the hope that we have in Jesus with those who are spiritually lost when they come in contact with them out in their communities. So, maybe my church organizes, hey, it's fall, we're going to gather all our students in our youth ministry to go rake leaves, and we're raking leaves, and we've got a wide open opportunity, or maybe we don't. What are some tips that you would encourage them to give to their students, to their people that they're serving alongside, that can engage in a spiritual conversation?
I mean, I would always say always have a verse ready to share. So memorize some verses that are really impactful. And I think this might be it could be somewhat old school. But even like, people used to send letters in the mail to people type thing. But I just think even like if you know the needs of someone's going through something, right? It could be a surgery, it could be cancer, it could be whatever, and that there's that struggle. Someone, maybe a husband just passed away and wife's feeling overwhelmed by now all this, maybe debt or just whatever the situation is. I think if we can always have a verse, and whether that you send a card and put a verse in there and just say, hey, God laid this verse upon my heart, I want to share it with you, knowing that this person's not a believer, but you can share scripture in a time that's really tough for them. I mean, you'll be amazed that people that they need that. They may not realize they need the verse, right? But they're craving that inside and their soul needs it. And so I think just always have a verse ready to share, whether that's you're sharing it verbally with someone, and it has to be a verse that means something to you, right? That God has used in your own life, right? But use a verse that can really encourage them in some way. And again, whether you're sharing that face to face, whether you're getting on the phone and sharing it over the phone, whether you're putting it in a letter and a card and mailing it to them. But I think that's one key thing, is always just have a verse that you can share with people. So.
And who knows what that could lead to, right? I mean, you plant that seed, and maybe that person had some kind of misconception about God and who he is, but then in a time of need, you show up with that verse, and it just kind of reverse engineers their thought process about how and when they come to God. And I think there's some power and some wisdom into what you're saying, Tim. One thing I would say, it's super simple, and maybe you want me to go deeper on this, but one thing that you could do, and what I would always tell my students in student ministries, is take a step. Take a step towards anything. They say the best leaders in the world aren't the ones that do everything to perfections. It's just the ones that go first usually. But take it, and that could look differently depending upon your situation, right? Maybe that person needs a meal. Maybe that person, you're going to share your favorite worship song with them, and that person never knew that type of music, that type of Jesus music existed, right? And so it's the little things, I think, contextually as it plays out in your relationships, right? Going back to the relationships that we're building, that we're taking an intentional step towards sharing the gospel with them. It could be, come to church with me. It could be, I'm going to sit down and have this Bible study with you. It's meeting them where they're at. But before that, before you can meet somewhere, like pushing your students or people on your team to take that step, to have that mindset to meet them where they're at, I think is pretty big.
Yeah, and Andy, that it may be even as simple as asking a question, right? Like, how can I pray for you? Which is a great question that we would all encourage people to ask to anybody that you come across. So if you're in line at Starbucks, right, ask the barista when they hand you your coffee, hey, how can I be praying for you today, right? If you're raking leaves in that scenario, whatever it would be, if you're riding bikes with somebody, then to be intentional, to take that step and engage in a conversation. Tim, I love sharing a verse, right? Something that's meaningful to you, or something that God's encouraged you with. Those are powerful conversation starters that they may seem like small things, but God often does his part and shows up in powerful ways. So thank you guys so much for sharing today. We hope this has been a beneficial conversation. Give us just a quick promo on Day of Hope, maybe for somebody who's just hearing about it for the first time. Tim, why don't you just kind of share what is it? What's our goal for that? What can they expect? And then how do they sign up? Kind of talk us through some of that.
Yeah, so I just say real quick, the beauty of Day of Hope, most people are, if you've come to Urban Hope before, to one of our locations, either Philly or LA, right? Oftentimes it's seen as like a destination to get to go to. Our big thrust, of course, is to send you back home. Like, we love that you come, but we want to send you back home because we want you to be practicing these things and doing these things in your community. And so the beauty of Day of Hope is now you are in your community, and you're getting to do these things right there in your community, still getting a piece of the Urban Hope experience, still getting some of the training. And so Day of Hope, it's going to be a day that really you get to plan. We'll do some training with you in the morning through a training session that we'll do through a Zoom similar to this, that you'll transfer to a big room in your church or somewhere where all your folks can come. But we're going to give you some principles. It'll be a little bit different than what you've probably gotten before at an Urban Hope Center. And so it won't be the same stuff. There'll be some similar components, but it'll be a little bit of a different teaching. And so come be a part of that in the morning. And then we're going to send you out, kind of commission you to go out into your community. And again, the beauty of this is there's churches all across the U.S. We have churches in California that have signed up. We have churches in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Indiana. Like there's churches all across the U.S. that are going to be doing this at the exact same time as you. I think there's a great power in that, right? To know that you're not doing this alone, and that God is working throughout the U.S. In the same day, same time frame. But we're going to give you opportunities to go into your community. Again, assess the needs ahead of time. Know how you can meet the needs, how you can share the gospel in your community, get your people involved in that, so that they're not only getting the education and the training that morning, but then they're getting the experience. And again, the goal is that they would take away some principles so that the rest of the week, the rest of the year, they can be practicing those things with their coworkers, with their neighbors, with their peers at school, whatever club they're a part of, right? Whatever setting they're in. And we're going to challenge you at the end of the Day of Hope at some point to sit down with your team and to debrief the day and then talk about what's that next step, right? What does that next step look like for each individual in your group? It may be a next step as a church or as a student ministry. That's fine. Or it may be next steps for each individual person. What are you going to do with this now? Because again, we don't want it to be, we don't want it to just be a destination or one-time event. We want it to be a launching pad. We want it to be a next steps thing in your journey, because we realize that evangelism, sharing your faith, it's a process. And it all goes back to relationships, building relationships which take time. So
yeah, awesome. So how do they sign up for that? Andy, kind of walk us through what do they need to do? Is there a deadline for that?
Yeah, so there is no cost. Again, as we mentioned before, it's totally free, which has been pretty encouraging for some of the pastors that I've talked to, because after I get done explaining it, it was almost like they were waiting, and they even asked me, like, so how much is it? I'm like, no, it's free. But it is important that you do sign up, because that helps us to connect everybody for the same day, give you the Zoom link, give you the training material that we're going to give you, even helping you prior to figure out what your day is going to look like and what the day will look like for us with you. So signing up is pretty important. If you go on any of our social media, you're going to figure it out pretty quickly, because it's all over there. But you can also go to urbanhope.net /Day of Hope. And it'll also, there's multiple links on there. It'll be right there where you can sign up. It's not a difficult process. It's pretty easy, pretty cut and dry, but it is pretty important to sign up, to let us. So if you've been thinking about that you want to go and you want to come, it's helpful if you do sign up. So that's.
Yeah, and we would encourage you to sign up well in advance now, so that we can begin those conversations to help you think through, what your day would look like. Because in the morning, I understand there's going to be a piece of it that will be online together with the two of you and on Zoom. But then in the afternoon, there'll be some opportunities to go out in your community. So you'll want to have thought that through well in advance. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this. Andy, would you just pray for our viewers, pray for the opportunities for them to impact their community?
Yep, absolutely. God, we want to come to you right now and just say thank you for the opportunity to love others the way that you love us, and that you have loved us from the moment that we were created. Even before that, when we were created, you had a plan for us, and we just want to be used to that capacity. And so use us as Urban Hope and as CE, and just as people, to connect with other churches that may know us, that may not know us, that have been struggling, God, because this has been a rough season for all of us. And so, God, help us to be that reprieve and that resource and the ray of light that you want us to be, that you are to our souls, and that we can help to be that to our fellow ministry leaders, and that we can give a tangible way to go out into the world that we are connected to, our communities, and serve them and show them the hope and the love that you have, Jesus. So be with us to do that. Be with us even now in these moments as we're watching this video, as we're thinking about who we could have sign up for a Day of Hope. God, be with us in these moments where we could build your kingdom and be used to bring others to you. We love you so much, Jesus. It is in your name that we pray all of these things and more. Amen.
Amen.